All right, everyone. So we are in chapter 7 today. We'll be in chapter 7 today. And just a reminder that today is officially our last day of the week. We do not have a live session tomorrow, so I just didn't want anyone to think we were going to be on tomorrow. All right, before we get into chapter 7, just wanted to do a little recap. Um, Please remember to do those long-term goals if you haven't. Sorry about you don't have a discussion post, but also please remember to set up those interviews for your mock interview and your resume. Now, I have had a few people say or ask the question about, can they set them up together? What if they're going out on vacation? There have been some instances where the campus career services person has a scheduling conflict. So the way that it works is we want you to do your resume meeting with career services now, right? So right now, anytime between now and obviously before next Thursday, because they need time to review your resume and get it back to you so you can turn it in. So you need to get those done right away. Like I indicated, many of the meetings, whether you set it up like you're supposed to and just turn it in as an assignment, saying I'm going to meet with career services Thursday at 5. Sometimes that's just a phone call. Sometimes, your career services just tells you to email them your resume. Like, it may not be an official, you have to go in and see them. So don't like freak out about that. The main thing for that assignment is that you've made contact with career services and you guys have worked together to figure out how to do your resume. That is the most important thing. You don't want to do your interviews at the same time because the objective is for you to have a finished interview by the time. I'm sorry. You don't want to do your interview and your resume at the same time because the objective is for you to have your finished resume before you interview with them. If in the off chance that you're not going to be around or something, there's a conflict and they want to do it together, like I'm not going to like hold you against it. I'm not going to hold that against you. If you need to do it earlier than week 3, I'm not going to hold that against you. Like there's no hard and fast, rule that you have to do your mock interview in week 3, but it just makes sense because we're going to go over interviewing in week 2. So we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to, get through the material before you meet. But if there are any, exceptions and you need to do it, like go ahead. Don't feel like you can't do that. Does everyone understand? I want to make sure I've answered all the questions that I've received so far regarding that. Does anyone have any questions regarding that? The main thing is to work with your campus. Maybe I should have just kept it simple, right? So just work with your campus and do what it is you need to do. All right. And just because whatever time and date you put in that assignment, because you want to go ahead and do that to get credit, that doesn't mean that can't change. If something needs to change, it needs to change. Just work with your services on that. I'm fine with that. All right. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about resumes, and what goes into a resume. We're going to talk about um, how to write them, the importance of trigger words, and things that you'll find in a job description. And this is really just to give you some insight into how critical it is to, write and manage your resumes well. So let's talk about it. So we all know that a resume is a written document, right? And the goal of it is to list out your qualifications, your work experience, your education. Are you trying to convince an employer that you're the right person for the job? Of course you are, right? So it's so important that you really look through what that job description is asking you for, and you ensure that if you here's the deal. When you look at a job advertisement, like we had you do, right? We're going to have you do tonight. That job advertisement has what both hard skills and soft skills listed in that job description. Those are what we call keywords or trigger words that need to be reflected in your resume. If they put it in the job description, it was important enough for them to ensure that whoever responds to that job description has that experience. Let me tell you why else it's important. When you look at that job description, and here's an example, this is a welding job description. If you are a welder, you should be able to identify what's important and what isn't, right? So, pretending that we're all welders and we go through this job description and we're going to highlight things like, and if there's any welders in the building, any welders in the building, you can let us know if we've highlighted this correctly or not. We're going to highlight the key words in this job description, right? So they want us to be able to interpret and read blueprints, to install torches, to operate manual and semi-automatic welding equipment. They also want us to do what? Let's look at the bottom. What do we see at the bottom? Somebody tell me. What's that bottom bullet called?
Teamwork.
Which is called, what type of skill is that?
Working with others.
What type of skill is that? It's a soft skill, right? It's not a technical skill, so it's a soft skill. Remember, you're going to find two different types of skills when you look at these job descriptions. Technical skills are hard skills, and you're going to find those soft skills. Typically, the more important skill is always at the top. That's a hint. Not to say that working with others is not as important, but they want you to still be able to do it. What are they telling you? They're probably letting you know that you're probably going to be on some type of project team. And so they want you to be able to work effectively with others, right? They also want you to be able to stay up to date on welding technologies. They want you to be able to adhere to safety protocols. Now, why is this so important that you really highlight these keywords? Let me tell you something, my friends. In today's technology enhanced environment, most HR companies are not going to read your resume. They are going to take your resume and they are going to put it through what we call an automatic tracking software system. And what do you think that automatic tracking software system is going to do? Can anyone guess?
Keywords.
They're going to look for Anthony's like, is this a trick question? No, it's not. That system is going to look for keywords. And what do you think is going to happen if that system, that computer, does not find any keywords? What's going to happen?
Get
Somebody tell
booted.
me. 9 times out of 10, you are going to receive an email and it's going to sound something like this. Thank you so much for applying for this position. We received a lot of qualified applicants. At this time, we've decided to choose someone that is more closely aligned with what we need. A person has never seen your resume, all because you did not ensure that you had those keywords in your resume. Wait a minute, Miss Cynthia. Are you telling me that every time I apply to a job, if I have those skills, I need to edit my resume every time and make sure what's in that job description is on my resume? Yep. Now, if you don't have those skills, then you can't do it. Why is that so important? Nobody is going to put every single skill that they've ever had at a job. We can all agree that when you work for someone, you do a lot of different things, right? Two pieces of paper is not enough to write down everything that you do at a company. And what one company wants, another company may not want. Think about it. If you're in electrical or welding or HVAC or even VA, if I'm in VA, do you think working for a pet hospital is going to be the same as working at a zoo? Will it be the same with working at a animal shelter? No, right? If I'm an electrical, if I go work for the airport doing low voltage, lights, versus if I go work for a major new construction home, they may want me to have different skills, even though I'm electrical. Does that make sense? What they identify in a job description for me to go work at GOA, Orlando Aviation Authority, and what they need for me to do, putting up CCTVs and things like that, it may be totally different from what they need me to do wiring a new construction home. I can do both. I may not put both of those on my resume. I may just speak in general, right? So if I go to apply for that job at GOA, I need to make sure that I can speak to me being able to put up a TV. Does that make sense? I may not need the fact that I know how to put up a TV if I'm going to apply for a job at a new home construction company. Do y'all understand that point? So every time you look at a job description, you're going to have to adjust your resume if you have that skill. Is that why it's so hard to find a job, Miss Taylor? Yeah. Is finding a job sometimes a full-time job? Absolutely. You have to take the time to do that. But I promise you, if you can do that well, and I say use AI, if you know how to use AI like Copilot and Chat GPT, and you can put it through there, and there's a lot of software now that will allow you to take a job description and align your resume with that job description, and then you can look back and because the computer is only giving you suggestions, and you can adjust it to make sure you hit all those keywords. If you want the job, you have to do the work. And I promise you, even myself, when I get lazy, as people sometimes do, and I submit a resume without doing my due diligence, the chances of me getting a call back are far, far slimmer than when I use the keywords and I take the time and I adjust my cover letter and I adjust my resume. I get almost an 80% increase in getting a call back. But you have to take the time to do that. You don't want some computer system giving you that letter. Anybody ever had that email letter before? Isn't it annoying? So, when you do your resume, right, there are going to be a lot of sections in your resume: the heading, the summary, the skills, the experience, the education. Let's get into what you need to make sure you have on there. My friends, don't ever put your address on your resume. I know it's in the book. Don't do that. Why? Because nowadays, unfortunately, when we utilize the Indeed, the job banks, the job boards, and all those different things, there are nefarious characters everywhere you go. Anywhere there's technology, anywhere there's opportunity, there are going to be nefarious characters that are looking to do something bad. So have been fake companies that, take people's resumes and try to take your personal information. Do not put your address on your resume, but everything else that the book says, okay. I even say, you don't necessarily have to put your phone number either, right? I'll typically start, unless you want to send it directly to the company, right? If you're comfortable with the company, go to their website, then whatever, right? And nowadays, I think Indeed has a way that they can you can use the option not to put your personal information there. But at any rate, at the top you clearly still need your full name, a phone number. Some people use Google phone numbers. Your email address is fine. Your LinkedIn account is great, right? You do want to, however, put your geographic location. So it's okay to say things like Fort Myers, Florida, right? That's okay because there are some companies that want to make sure. You guys go ahead and put yourselves on mute. There are some companies that want to make sure that you are in the vicinity of the company, right? They don't want to hire you if you're like 2 hours away or something like that. So it's okay to put your city and state because companies will ask that question. So that part is fine, right? Now, here is another key piece. Always have either or a summary, a profile, or a qualifications at the top. Why is that? Because those ATS systems are going to look for keywords in your summary. Mm? We'll talk about writing a summary later in the course, but it's going to be very, very important to have that summary. If you don't have a summary, you're just shooting yourselves in the foot. Sometimes, um, when recruiters use ATS systems, like especially if they go onto LinkedIn and they use LinkedIn a lot to look for people, they'll just use that little summary. Again, right? This is a competition, so you don't want to, put yourself in the back just because you don't have that. So definitely have some type of summary, qualifications, profile. People call it, one of those three things where you're going to identify keywords in what you do. All right. Now, some people have skills on their resume. It's not required, but clearly, if you operate in an environment where skills are important, like an IT field or a technical field, then put the skills. A lot of people use it like two different columns, and it's okay to use bullet points and just talking about a few skills. Don't overdo that though. Don't overdo it. I say don't go down more than four rows because your resume is not a lunch menu, right? You don't want it to look like that, right? But having the skills, and what are you going to put in those skills? Those trigger words, those keywords are what you're going to put in those skills. Each time you're going to change it to make sure your skills section have those hard and soft skills that you've seen in that job advertisement. Some of you may say, well, Miss Taylor, I'm confused. We're writing a resume now and we don't even have a job description. Yeah, because the resume you're writing now is really like a template, right? It's a guide. You're going to have tons and tons of resumes. And this is why I say it is a full-time job because you have to keep track of what resume you're sending what person, right? I normally keep my, main resume, if you will, and then I'll keep, various resumes for whatever organization. Now, once I get a job or I've chosen, you can delete those just so you're not confused or keep it somewhere where you're not confused. But, you want to have your main resume and then you adjust your main resume from there. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah, give me a thumbs up. Anybody confused on what I'm saying? Now, when it comes to your education, very good. Thanks, guys. Some people put their education right at the top. Some people put it after their experience. Now, you know, us older folks who have been around forever, if we have tons and tons of experience, a lot of us put our education at the back because we're like, okay, we have some degrees. Everybody knows that by now, right? But when you're like fresh in a um, career or new industry, it's okay to put your education at the top, especially if that is like a major component of what you have to offer, right? Put it right at the top. When you do your education, make sure you have two things. Number one, make sure you have the name of the school that you graduated from, and you want to make sure you have the city and state. A lot of companies will make sure that it's a real school. Do people actually put fake schools on their resume? Y'all know wherever there's an opportunity, there's going to be somebody that tries to take advantage. So people actually put fake schools. Yep, yep, yep. That's why they want the city and state. So if they've never heard of that school before, like Appalachian Mountains University, they may look that up, right? Just to make sure it's a real school, right? So you want to make sure you have at least that. And then they also sometimes want to know, what year you graduated. Sometimes if you haven't graduated, you can just put presently attending or, anticipated graduation date, whatever. Now, this is so important. When you write your experience, similar to your education, you definitely want to put the name of the company followed by the city and state. And then you want to go to the next line and put whatever position you had there and the dates that you've worked at that company. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because everybody writes resumes differently. The book is going to tell you whatever. I'm going to tell you whatever. Your career services may have a viewpoint. Here is one thing where it varies. The way I write my resumes, I used to teach HR certification. I always write resumes where the first paragraph, I write like three sentences, and it's a brief summary of what that job was. But then I always follow up with at least three bullet points on how well I've done that job. So if I were an accountant, I would write a brief summary of what I did as an accountant for that company. And then I would follow up with something like how much money I saved, how many accounts I managed, if I had to go through an audit or not, just some type of key accomplishment that I had at that company. That will make you stand out with someone else, trust me, right? So, in addition to those keywords, if you're up against another accountant and that person is just giving a little summary of the work that they've done, but they're not talking about any key accomplishments that they've done at that job, someone that is looking at it may say, "Ooh, well, I like this person. They've been through an audit before. We have these audits all the time. They've managed multiple accounts. Maybe the other guy did too, but he didn't put any of that on his resume." So I always say, make sure that you put some type of key accomplishments on your resume. The reason why I say everybody does it differently, some people just do bullets. I'm not a fan of that. Some people just do a paragraph form and they don't put any bullets. I'm not a fan of that either. I like to do both. I think it makes sense. But what is universal is make sure whatever you write has what? What do you want to make sure whatever you write has? Somebody tell me.
Job description,
And what
keywords from the job
and
description.
those keywords, I know it almost sounds like you're overselling, right? You're not. You're not. You are not overselling because at the end of the day, half the time you're up against a computer, right? So you got to get past that computer. The computer's like the gatekeeper. That little sucker is looking for keywords. So you got to get past that gatekeeper and then get in the hands of the actual HR person, right? So don't feel like you're overdoing it by making sure you have keywords all over your resume. Does anyone have any questions about the experience section? Bradley, you had a question? Or your hand's just up? Okay. If you have a question, just say it. I'm not sure. All right. Now, when it comes to formats, most formats that we're all used to are what we call a timeline or a chronological resume. What does that mean? That just means you list your experience in chronological order, starting with your most recent position all the way down to your earliest. Most companies or most, the protocol says you don't need to go back more than 10 years. Sometimes you have to go back further than 10 years. I go back further than 10 years, but they say keep it to at least 2 pages. It really depends on your industry and how long you've been in it. My resume is longer than 2 pages. I try not to go past three, four tops, but it just really depends on, your industry and how long you've been in it. But the main thing is um, that you have the I would say at least 10 years in it. Okay, if you have 10 years of experience. Another type of resume is called a skills resume. You don't see it that often, but you will see it in more tech related jobs, sometimes in healthcare industries as well, where the work itself is very unique. Like, let's say if I am a web developer and I make websites, right? So I may list all the skills I have as a web developer, and then I'll list all the different companies that I worked for. So I won't have to like go through seeing the same thing over and over again. If I did a website for Google and I did a website for Amazon and I did a website for Meta. I do websites, so I don't need to say Meta. Here's what I did with the websites. Amazon, here's what I did with the website. So sometimes skills based resumes are okay depending upon the industry that you're in, or you can do a combination. I've also seen where they will do like, oh, I worked at Amazon and here's a briefly what I've done. Um, or no, excuse me. Here's I worked as a web developer. Here's what I've done, and then they'll list the companies underneath, or something like that. But the point is, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. But for sure, chronological is still the most prevalent way that people write resumes. But in chapter 7, you'll see all those different examples. Now, because companies are using these ATS systems, they ask that you send your resume via PDF. For sure, they want it PDF or Word, but most times you'll see them say PDF, right? A lot of times they don't want you to send Word sometimes because if they are downloading resumes and then they make a mistake and as they're trying to go through your resume, sometimes, the HR person is trying to, look for different trigger words and they sometimes delete stuff by mistake. So just so no one makes a mistake with their resume, a lot of times they'll just want you to send it PDF. So it's important for you to know how to do that, right? It's not that difficult. Most Word um, software allows you to save as a PDF anyway, so that should be fairly simple. Now, when they talk about non-traditional resumes, I'm going to give the main example of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like your own private portfolio. When you do a LinkedIn, give me a thumbs up if you have LinkedIn. You are going to have a work section, right? So those of us that have LinkedIn, quite a few people, great, where you're going to list out your experience in a chronological way. So this LinkedIn would be an example of a web-based non-traditional resume because you list out your resume on LinkedIn, but you do a lot of other stuff too that's really cool, right? You could put your education, you could put certifications, you can do videos, you can do learning, you find jobs. There's so much you can do on LinkedIn, but it would be an example of like a virtual, non traditional resume. All right, my friends. I just got done telling you that you need to write your resume over and over and over again. So, what do you think you need to definitely do? Proofread. Do not be like me and send the wrong resume to the wrong person. Have I done that before? I have. Forgot to change the cover letter's name. I have. His name is Tom, and I say, hello, Sarah. Listen, 9 times out of 10, Tom may be offended. And there goes my opportunity. People are very persnickety. I know you would think he would give me a chance, right? A lot of times people don't give you a chance. If they see typos in your resume, if they see typos in your cover letter, it's not that well, I'm not going to say it's not that they're judging, but here's the thing. They're thinking, oh, okay, this person is not paying attention to detail, or oh, they're probably just sending out their resume to a million different companies as if they don't do the same. But you'd be surprised that companies want to feel like, oh, I really want to work for you. You're the only company in the world I want to work for. Yeah, okay, you and 500 other people I've sent my resume to, right? But they don't want to see that. So you definitely don't want to make a mistake and, send the wrong resume to the wrong person. So make sure you're proofreading and taking your time and not making the mistakes that I've made in the past. All right. When it comes to professional references, this is another thing where you want to get your reference um, individuals' approval before you send out the information. You want to have it on a separate sheet of paper, but similar to your information, like don't put their personal information there unless they give you permission to do that. It's okay to put like their company and the company's address and maybe the company phone number if they say so or their email address. Make sure you ask your reference. Would you prefer your personal email or your work email? Some people work for companies that are a little, persnickety about that. So make sure you get their approval. If you know you are in the job market and you got a hit and you had an interview and these people want to call your references, make sure the reference people know that you are, in the market and someone could be calling them. What I do as a courtesy to people that are giving me a reference, I will send them the job description and I will send them a little blurb about why I want to work there so they'll know what to say. Now, if you have true references, you don't have to like ask your cousin to do your reference. Now, yeah, y'all know, let me tell you how naive I am. I was literally last year is when I learned that people actually use fake references. I didn't know people did that. Call me naive. I had a very high ranking person I worked with, and she goes, yeah, yeah, I just use my ex husband as a reference. I'm like, what? Who does that? Like, it never would have occurred to me to do that. Listen, if you have a professional career, people, you don't have to worry about doing that type stuff. Always keep you a couple of professional references. You want people that actually know what you do, not somebody that has to fake it. As long and you don't and you'll learn that, it doesn't take much to build these relationships and people have references for it will do references for you. I've done references for people that haven't worked with me or for me in 10 years. It doesn't matter as long as you have a some type of, working relationship and they know the work that you've done, use them as a reference. Just make sure you let them know, what they're being a reference to. All right? So, here is your participation question for tonight. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell me three different things you learned about resumes today. If you haven't learned anything from me, uh, which is fine, get it from the readings. Read the book or myself. Three things that you've learned about resumes today. I'm going to come back to that. I also want to talk about your assignment. So, with your assignment, here's what I want you to do. I want you to find three different job postings. They can all be from one website. Let's say if you go to Indeed.com, you know how when you go to Indeed.com and find three different jobs, and I want you to look for those trigger words, those keywords, both hard skills and soft skills. And so let's say, for example, if I am looking for a teaching job, and I go to Southern Tech, I go to UCF, I go to Valencia, and they all say that they want me to be able to write curriculum, they want me to be able to be online, and they want me to be have done some type of corporate audits. Those are all technical. So they all three say that. So those are going to be the top three things that I saw from each of these companies. Soft skills, they say, oh, they want me to be a team player. They want me to be a good listener. They want me to be a problem solver. Okay, they all are saying that. So those are going to be three things that they each said. Does that make sense? And what you're going to do, so when you go onto Indeed.com, if once you click on the job, if you just look up in the web address, you'll see the URL up there. So you're just going to copy that. So if I were to click on it, it'll take me to that job posting. All right? So that is what you're going to do for your assignment. But let me go back to your participation question just for those who didn't write it down. Just three different things you learned about writing resumes today. I want to remind everyone that we do not have class on Friday. I know, but Miss Taylor, we love coming to you at 6 o'clock before it's time to eat. No, you don't. It's okay. I'm not offended. We will be back here on Monday. Please try to get everything in by Sunday, my friends. Please try to get everything in by Sunday. Thank you guys so much. You've done great. The week is over. Look at that. It wasn't as bad as you thought, right? I know some of you were like, oh my goodness, I have to be online. What is that? See, now you're going to be so spoiled. You're going to want to do all your classes online. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to stand back. I'm just going to stop the recording. 1 second here. I know how to push the button. Jeremiah, you had a question?